The sound of shattering glass pierced the air, followed by a string of expletives that would make a sailor blush. I rushed into the kitchen, my heart pounding, to find Mark standing over a mess of broken dishes and spilled pasta sauce. "Damn it, Julia! Can't you put things away properly?" he snapped, his face flushed with anger. I bit my tongue, resisting the urge to point out that he was the one who had insisted on reorganizing the cabinets last week. Instead, I grabbed a broom and dustpan. "It's okay, honey. Accidents happen. Let me clean this up." As I swept up the shards, Mark stomped out of the kitchen, muttering under his breath. I sighed, feeling the weight of tension settle over our once peaceful home. "Everything all right down there?" Dennis's voice called from upstairs. "Fine, Dad," I shouted back, wincing at the strain in my voice. "Just a little accident, nothing to worry about." I finished cleaning and started on a new batch of pasta sauce, my mind wandering to happier times. It hadn't always been like this. When Mark and I first got married, we were blissfully happy. But then his father's accident changed everything. The timer on the stove buzzed, snapping me back to reality. I stirred the sauce and called out, "Dinner's ready!" Mark trudged back into the kitchen, his mood seemingly improved. He wrapped his arms around me from behind, nuzzling my neck. "Smells good, babe. Sorry about earlier." I leaned into his embrace, savoring the moment of peace. "It's okay. Let's just enjoy dinner, all right?" We set the table as Dennis made his way downstairs, each step slow and deliberate. I rushed to help him into his chair, ignoring Mark's impatient sigh. "How are you feeling today, Dennis?" I asked, spooning pasta onto his plate. He smiled weakly. "Better, thanks to you, Julia. Don't know what I'd do without you." Mark rolled his eyes. "Dad, you've got to start doing more for yourself. Julia's not your nurse." I shot Mark a warning glance. "It's fine. I'm happy to help." We ate in uncomfortable silence, the only sounds the scraping of forks against plates. I was about to attempt some small talk when the doorbell rang. Mark jumped up. "I'll get it!" I frowned, surprised by his eagerness. A moment later, I heard a familiar voice that made my stomach churn. "Hello, darlings." Patricia's shrill tone carried through the house. "I hope I'm not interrupting dinner." Mark's mother swept into the dining room, all designer clothes and overpowering perfume. She air-kissed Mark's cheeks before turning to me with a tight smile. "Julia, dear, you look tired. Are you getting enough rest?" I forced a smile. "I'm fine, Patricia. Would you like to join us for dinner?" "Oh no, I've already eaten. I just stopped by to discuss something with Mark." She turned to her son. "Do you have a moment, sweetheart?" Mark nodded eagerly. "Of course, Mom. Let's talk in the study." As they left, I caught a glimpse of Patricia slipping an envelope into Mark's hand. My curiosity piqued. I strained to hear their hushed conversation, but could only make out fragments. Perfect opportunity. She doesn't need to know. Take care of everything. A chill ran down my spine. What were they planning? Dennis cleared his throat, drawing my attention back to the table. His eyes, usually clouded with confusion, were surprisingly sharp. "Julia," he said softly, "I think we need to talk." Before I could respond, Mark and Patricia returned, both wearing suspiciously cheerful expressions. "Great news," Mark announced. "Mom's invited us on a trip to Europe, 2 weeks in Paris and Rome. Isn't that exciting?" I blinked, stunned. "But what about your father? We can't just leave him alone." Patricia waved her hand dismissively. "Oh, we'll hire a nurse. It'll be fine." As Mark launched into enthusiastic travel plans, I caught Dennis's eye. He gave me a subtle nod, confirming my growing suspicion that something wasn't right. In that moment, I realized our seemingly perfect family was about to be turned upside down. And I had a sinking feeling that I was the only one not in on the secret. The moving truck rumbled away, leaving us standing in Patricia's driveway, surrounded by boxes and uncertainty. I took a deep breath, trying to quell the anxiety bubbling in my chest. This was supposed to be temporary, just until we could find a place better suited for Dennis's recovery. But as I caught Patricia's critical gaze sweeping over our belongings, I had a sinking feeling that temporary might stretch longer than I'd hoped. "Well, don't just stand there gawking," Patricia chirped, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. "Let's get you settled in." Mark grabbed a box and followed his mother inside, leaving me to help Dennis navigate the front steps. As we made our way into the house, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were crossing a threshold into something far more complicated than a simple living arrangement. The first few days were a whirlwind of unpacking and adjusting. Patricia flitted about, offering unsolicited advice on everything from how to arrange our clothes to the proper way to make coffee. I bit my tongue, reminding myself that she was doing us a favor by taking us in. One morning, I was helping Dennis with his physical therapy exercises when Patricia burst into the room, her face pinched with displeasure. "Julia, dear," she said, her voice dripping with false sweetness, "I couldn't help but notice you've rearranged the guest room. I thought we agreed you'd keep things as they were." I blinked, caught off guard. "I'm sorry, Patricia. I just moved a few things to make it easier for Dennis to get around." Patricia's eyes narrowed. "Well, I'd appreciate it if you'd consult me before making any changes. This is still my house, after all." As she turned to leave, I saw Dennis roll his eyes behind her back. I stifled a laugh, grateful for the moment of shared frustration. The weeks wore on, and Patricia's helpful suggestions became more frequent and less subtle. She critiqued my cooking, my cleaning, even the way I helped Dennis. Mark, ever the dutiful son, seemed oblivious to the growing tension. One evening, I was folding laundry when I overheard Patricia and Mark talking in hushed tones in the study. "I'm just saying, Mark, she's not exactly wife material," Patricia hissed. "The way she coddles your father, it's like she's forgotten her place in this family." My hands froze mid-fold, my heart pounding in my ears. Mark's response was muffled, but I caught enough to make my blood run cold. "I know, Mom, but we need her right now, just until Dad's better, and we can—" The rest of his sentence was lost as they moved further into the room. I stood there, rooted to the spot, my mind reeling. What were they planning? And how could Mark talk about me like that? Later that night, as Mark snored softly beside me, I stared at the ceiling, my thoughts a tangled mess. I thought about the life we'd left behind, the dreams we'd had. When had everything gone so wrong? A soft knock at the door jolted me from my reverie. I padded across the room, opening it to find Dennis standing there, looking more alert than I'd seen him in weeks. "Julia," he whispered, his eyes darting nervously down the hall, "we need to talk. There's something you should know about Patricia and Mark." My heart raced as I ushered him into the room. As Dennis began to speak, his words confirming my worst fears and revealing even darker truths, I felt the last vestiges of my old life crumbling away. In that moment, standing in the dim light of Patricia's guest room, I realized that the family I thought I'd married into was nothing but a carefully constructed facade. And as Dennis laid bare the web of lies and manipulation that surrounded us, I knew that nothing would ever be the same again. With trembling hands, I reached for my phone. It was time to make some calls and start planning my next move. Because one thing was crystal clear. I couldn't stay in this house of secrets and lies for much longer. As the first light of dawn crept through the windows, I made a silent vow. I would protect Dennis, uncover the truth, and find a way out of this mess, no matter the cost. The morning sun streamed through the kitchen window, mocking my exhaustion. I'd been up since dawn, preparing breakfast, tidying the house, and helping Dennis with his morning routine. As I scrubbed dishes, my mind wandered to the life I'd imagined for myself. This certainly wasn't it. "Julia!" Patricia's shrill voice cut through my reverie. "Where's my morning tea?" I bit back a sigh. "Coming, Patricia." As I set the steaming cup before her, Patricia wrinkled her nose. "Is this Earl Grey? You know I prefer English breakfast in the morning." "I'm sorry," I said, forcing a smile. "We're out of English breakfast. I'll pick some up today." Patricia huffed. "See that you do. And while you're at it, the living room could use a good dusting. Really, Julia, I expected better from you." I clenched my jaw, fighting the urge to snap back. Instead, I nodded and retreated to the kitchen, where I found Mark lounging with his coffee. "Honey," I started, "I could really use your help today. Dennis has a doctor's appointment, and I need to run errands." Mark cut me off with a wave of his hand. "Sorry, babe. I've got a big meeting at work. You can handle it, right?" Before I could respond, he was out the door, leaving me alone with my frustration and a mountain of tasks. The day dragged on, each hour bringing a new challenge. Dennis struggled with his physical therapy, his progress seeming to plateau. Patricia's complaints echoed through the house, a constant reminder of my perceived shortcomings. By evening, I was at my breaking point. As I helped Dennis into bed, he squeezed my hand, his eyes full of concern. "Julia," he said softly, "you can't keep going like this. It's too much for one person." I felt tears prick at my eyes. "What choice do I have, Dennis? Mark's always working, and Patricia—" I trailed off, not wanting to speak ill of his wife. Dennis shook his head. "Patricia has always been difficult, but this is beyond the pale. And Mark?" He sighed heavily. "My son should be ashamed of himself." Just then, Patricia's voice rang out from downstairs. "Julia, where are you? These floors won't mop themselves." I closed my eyes, taking a deep breath. "I should go," I murmured to Dennis. As I descended the stairs, I found Patricia standing in the foyer, arms crossed. "Really, Julia," she began, her tone dripping with disdain, "I don't know why you insist on spending so much time with Dennis. He's perfectly capable of putting himself to bed." Something inside me snapped. "He's your husband, Patricia, and he needs our help. Why can't you see that?" Patricia's eyes widened, then narrowed dangerously. "How dare you speak to me like that in my own home? I've been nothing but generous, taking you in, and this is how you repay me?" "Generous?" I laughed bitterly. "You've done nothing but criticize and complain since we got here. I'm doing my best to take care of everyone, and it's never enough for you." Our voices had risen, echoing through the house. I heard the front door open, and Mark stepped in, looking bewildered. "What's going on here?" he demanded. Patricia turned to her son, tears welling in her eyes. "Oh, Mark, your wife is being absolutely dreadful to me. I don't know how much more of this I can take." Mark's face hardened as he looked at me. "Julia, what's wrong with you? How could you treat my mother this way?" I stared at him, incredulous. "Are you serious? After everything I've done, you're taking her side?" The tension in the room was palpable. I looked from Mark to Patricia, suddenly seeing them clearly for the first time. They were two sides of the same coin, manipulative and self-serving. In that moment, I made a decision. "I'm done," I said quietly. "I can't do this anymore." Mark's eyes widened. "What are you saying?" I straightened my spine, meeting his gaze. "I'm saying that something has to change. Either we leave this house or I'm leaving alone." The silence that followed was deafening. As I turned and walked away, leaving Mark and Patricia stunned in the foyer, I felt a strange mix of terror and exhilaration. I had no idea what would happen next, but I knew one thing for certain: things would never be the same again. The days following my outburst were tense, to say the least. Mark barely spoke to me, spending most of his time at work or locked away in Patricia's study. Patricia, for her part, had taken to ignoring me entirely, communicating only through icy glares and pointed sighs. But amid the frosty silence, I found an unexpected source of warmth: Dennis. One morning, as I helped him with his exercises, he grasped my hand firmly. "Julia," he said, his voice stronger than I'd heard in weeks, "I want you to know how much I appreciate everything you're doing." Tears pricked at my eyes. "Thank you, Dennis. That means more than you know." He nodded, a determined look crossing his face. "I've been thinking. It's time I started pushing myself harder." "Will you help me?" "Of course," I replied, feeling a spark of hope ignite in my chest. Over the next few weeks, Dennis and I fell into a new routine. We'd start each day with more challenging exercises, pushing the boundaries of what he could do. Some days were frustrating, filled with setbacks and pain. But there were also moments of triumph. The first time he stood unassisted, the day he managed to walk the length of the hallway with just a cane. Each small victory felt like a personal win, a reminder that my efforts weren't in vain. As Dennis grew stronger, so did my resolve. One afternoon, as we rested after a particularly grueling session, Dennis turned to me with a serious expression. "Julia, there's something you need to know about Patricia and Mark." My heart raced. "What is it?" Before he could answer, the door burst open. Patricia stood there, her face a mask of fury. "What do you think you're doing?" she hissed. "You're pushing him too hard. He's not ready for this." I stood my ground. "Dennis is making great progress. The doctor agrees that—" "The doctor?" Patricia interrupted. "What doctor? I haven't authorized any appointments." "I did," Dennis said firmly. "I'm perfectly capable of making my own medical decisions, Patricia." Patricia's face turned an alarming shade of red. "Mark!" she shrieked. "Mark, come here at once." Moments later, Mark appeared, looking flustered. "What's going on?" Patricia pointed an accusing finger at me. Your wife has been making decisions behind our backs. She's endangering your father's health. Mark's expression hardened. Is this true, Julia? I took a deep breath, steeling myself. I've been helping Dennis with his recovery. Yes, and he's improving. If you'd been around more, you'd see that. Mark's eyes flashed with anger. How dare you? We took you in, gave you a place to stay, and this is how you repay us? Repay you, I laughed bitterly. I've been working myself to the bone taking care of this family while you two plot and scheme behind my back. The room fell silent. Dennis cleared his throat. Son, your wife is right. She's been doing all the work while you and your mother. He trailed off, shaking his head. Mark's face paled. Dad, you don't understand. We're just trying to protect you. Protect me from what? Dennis demanded. From getting better? From regaining my independence? Patricia stepped forward, her voice sickly sweet. Darling, you know your condition is delicate. We just want what's best for you. I watched the exchange, pieces falling into place. The hushed conversations, the mysterious meetings, the resistance to Dennis's recovery, it all pointed to something sinister. What are you two hiding? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Mark and Patricia exchanged a panicked look. In that moment I knew. Whatever secret they were keeping, it was big, and it had everything to do with Dennis's accident and recovery. Dennis struggled to his feet, leaning heavily on his cane. I think it's time we had a family meeting, he said, his voice filled with a quiet authority I'd never heard before. No more secrets, no more lies. As I helped Dennis to the living room, my mind raced. Whatever was about to be revealed, I had a feeling it would change everything. And I knew with absolute certainty that I was ready to face it head on. The time for playing happy families was over. Now it was time for the truth. The tension in the living room was palpable as we gathered for the long-overdue family meeting. Dennis sat in his armchair, his posture more upright than I'd seen in months. Mark and Patricia perched on the edge of the sofa, exchanging nervous glances. I stood by the fireplace, my heart pounding. Before anyone could speak, Patricia cleared her throat. Before we get into whatever this is, I have an announcement to make. She plastered on a bright smile. Mark and I are going on a vacation to Europe, 2 weeks in Paris and Rome. Isn't that wonderful? I felt like I'd been slapped. What? Now? But what about Dennis's care? Mark avoided my gaze. We thought you could handle it, Julia. You've been doing such a great job. Dennis's eyes narrowed. And when were you planning to inform me of this little getaway? Patricia waved her hand dismissively. Oh, darling, we didn't want to burden you with the details. You know how travel talk exhausts you. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. So you're just going to leave? After everything that's happened? Now, Julia, Patricia said, her voice sickly sweet. Don't be dramatic. It's just a little vacation. We all need a break sometimes, don't we? Something inside me snapped. A break? A break from what exactly? From watching me run myself ragged, taking care of your family while you two scheme and plot? Mark stood up, his face flushed. That's enough, Julia. You're out of line. No, she's not, Dennis said quietly. Julia's right. It's time we address the elephant in the room. He turned to Mark and Patricia. What really happened the night of my accident? The color drained from Patricia's face. I don't know what you mean, darling. You fell down the stairs, remember? Dennis shook his head. No, I don't remember. But I've been having flashes, arguments, raised voices, something about the company. Mark's hands were shaking. Dad, you're confused. The doctors said your memory might be affected. Stop lying, I shouted, surprising even myself with the force of my words. Whatever you're hiding, it ends now. Dennis deserves the truth. Patricia stood up abruptly. This is ridiculous. Mark, we're leaving. Now. As they moved towards the door, I blocked their path. Not until you explain yourselves. Mark's eyes flashed with anger. Move, Julia. You have no idea what you're getting into. Then enlighten me, I challenged. For a moment, I thought Mark might push past me, but then his shoulders sagged. Fine. You want the truth? Dad was going to sell the company. He said he was tired, wanted to retire. But Mom and we couldn't let that happen. We tried to talk him out of it, but he wouldn't listen. Dennis's voice was barely a whisper. So you what? Pushed me down the stairs? Patricia let out a strangled sob. It was an accident. We were arguing and you just fell. We never meant for any of this to happen. The room spun around me as the implications of their confession sank in. They had been willing to let Dennis languish, to keep him dependent, all to maintain control of the company. "You monsters," I breathed. Mark reached for me. "Julia, please, you have to understand." I recoiled from his touch. "Understand what? That you've been lying to me our entire marriage? That you were willing to sacrifice your own father's health for money?" Patricia's eyes hardened. "You ungrateful little—" "Enough!" Dennis's voice boomed through the room. With effort, he pushed himself to his feet. "Mark, Patricia, I want you out of this house. Now." "But Dad—" Mark started. Dennis held up a hand. "No, I've heard enough. Go on your vacation. When you return, my lawyers will be in touch." As Mark and Patricia hurried out, casting panicked glances over their shoulders, I felt a strange mix of relief and terror. The truth was out, but the battle was far from over. Dennis turned to me, his eyes filled with a mixture of pain and determination. "Julia, I'm going to need your help. Are you with me?" I took a deep breath, squaring my shoulders. "Every step of the way, Dennis. Whatever comes next, we'll face it together." As the door slammed behind Mark and Patricia, I knew we were standing on the precipice of something monumental. The life I had known was over. But perhaps, just perhaps, something better was about to begin. The house felt eerily quiet in the days following Mark and Patricia's hasty departure. Dennis and I moved through the rooms like ghosts, each lost in our own thoughts. The weight of recent revelations hung heavy in the air, a constant reminder of the betrayal we'd both endured. On the third morning, I was preparing breakfast when Dennis wheeled himself into the kitchen, a determined look on his face. "Julia," he said, his voice stronger than I'd heard in months, "we need to talk." I set down the spatula, my heart racing. "What is it, Dennis?" He took a deep breath. "I haven't been entirely honest with you. My recovery, it's been progressing faster than I've let on." To my astonishment, Dennis pushed himself up from the wheelchair, standing on shaky but steady legs. He took a few tentative steps towards me, no cane in sight. "Oh my God," I breathed. "Dennis, this is amazing, but why didn't you tell me?" His eyes clouded with shame. "I was afraid of what Patricia and Mark might do if they knew I was getting better. But after what happened, I can't hide anymore." As the implications of his words sank in, a mix of emotions washed over me. Joy at his progress, anger at the deception, and a growing sense of determination. "We need to act fast," I said, my mind racing. "Mark and Patricia could be back any day. We need a plan." Dennis nodded grimly. "I've been thinking about that. I know where Patricia keeps all the important documents, financial records, company papers, everything. If we can get our hands on those—" "We could expose them," I finished, a spark of hope igniting in my chest. For the next few hours, Dennis and I pored over the house, searching for any evidence of Mark and Patricia's misdeeds. We found hidden bank statements showing suspicious transfers, emails discussing the accident, in coded language, and even a draft of a revised will that would have left Dennis with nothing. As we sat surrounded by damning evidence, Dennis's phone buzzed. His face paled as he read the message. "It's Mark," he said, his voice tight. "They're coming back early. They'll be here tomorrow morning." Panic clawed at my throat. What do we do? Dennis's eyes hardened with resolve. "We finish this tonight." What followed was a whirlwind of activity. We scanned documents, made copies, and prepared a detailed timeline of events. Dennis called his lawyer, arranging an emergency meeting for first thing in the morning. As night fell, we sat in the living room, the fruits of our labor spread out before us. The magnitude of what we were about to do hit me like a tidal wave. "Dennis," I whispered, "are you sure about this? Once we do this, there's no going back." He reached out, grasping my hand tightly. "Julia, you've been more family to me in these past months than my own flesh and blood. Whatever happens, we face it together." Tears pricked at my eyes as I nodded, squeezing his hand in return. Suddenly, the sound of a car pulling into the driveway shattered the moment. My blood ran cold as I heard familiar voices approaching the front door. "They're back," I hissed, panic rising in my chest. "What do we do?" Dennis's face set in grim determination. "We stand our ground. No more hiding. No more lies." As the key turned in the lock, I felt a strange calm settle over me. We'd prepared for this, planned for every contingency. Whatever Mark and Patricia threw at us, we were ready. The door swung open, revealing Mark and Patricia, their faces a mix of surprise and suspicion as they took in the scene before them. "What's going on here?" Mark demanded, his eyes darting between Dennis and me. I stood up slowly, my heart pounding but my voice steady. "Welcome home," I said, my tone laced with steel. "We need to talk." As Mark and Patricia stepped into the room, the air crackled with tension. This was it, the moment of truth. Everything we'd been through, everything we'd discovered had led to this confrontation, and I was ready to fight with everything I had. The tension in the room was suffocating as Mark and Patricia stood frozen in the doorway, their eyes darting between Dennis and me, and the incriminating documents spread across the coffee table. "What is all this?" Patricia demanded, her voice shrill. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. "This is the truth, Patricia. All of it." Mark stepped forward, his face a mask of fury. "What have you done, Julia, going through our private papers? This is a violation." "No," Dennis interrupted, slowly rising to his feet. "The only violation here is what you two have done to this family." Patricia's face drained of color as she watched her husband stand. "Dennis, how... You're walking." "No thanks to you," I spat, my anger finally boiling over. "We know everything. The accident, the company, the will, all of it." Mark lunged forward, reaching for the papers, but I was quicker. I snatched them up, backing away. "Don't even think about it, Mark. It's over." "You don't understand," Mark pleaded, his composure cracking. "We were trying to protect the family legacy. Dad was going to throw it all away." Dennis's voice was cold as steel. "It wasn't yours to protect, son. The company, the money, none of it matters more than trust and family. Something you seem to have forgotten." Patricia's eyes narrowed dangerously. "You ungrateful little witch," she hissed at me. "We took you in, gave you everything, and this is how you repay us? By turning my husband against us?" I stood my ground, meeting her gaze. "You did this to yourselves, Patricia. Your greed, your manipulation. It ends now." The room erupted into chaos. Mark lunged for the documents again, this time managing to grab a handful. Patricia screamed accusations, her carefully manicured facade crumbling. Dennis tried to intervene, but in the scuffle, he lost his balance. Time seemed to slow as I watched Dennis fall. In that moment, all I could think about was that night, the night of his accident. Had it looked like this? Had he reached out, desperate for help, only to be betrayed by those he trusted most? I dove forward, managing to catch Dennis before he hit the ground. As we stumbled, my elbow caught the edge of the coffee table. Pain exploded through my arm, but I held on, easing Dennis onto the sofa. "Enough," I shouted, my voice raw with emotion. "Look at what you're doing. Your own father. You'd risk hurting him again just to cover your tracks?" Mark froze, the papers clutched in his trembling hands. For the first time I saw a flicker of shame in his eyes. Patricia, however, was beyond reason. "You have no right," she seethed. "This is our home, our family. You're nothing but an interloper, a gold digger who—" "That's enough, Patricia," Dennis cut in, his voice quiet but firm. "Julia is more family to me now than either of you, and as of this moment you are both no longer welcome in this house." The silence that followed was deafening. Mark's face crumpled, the reality of what he'd done finally sinking in. Patricia stood rigid, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. "You can't be serious," she finally managed. "You can't just throw us out. Where will we go?" I stepped forward, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside me. "That's not our problem anymore. You have until morning to pack your things and leave. If you're not gone by then, we'll have no choice but to involve the authorities." As the weight of our words sank in, I saw the fight drain out of Mark and Patricia. They looked suddenly small, defeated, no longer the towering figures of authority and control they'd once been. Dennis reached for my hand, squeezing it gently. "It's over," he whispered. But as I looked at the broken family before me, at the husband I'd once loved and the life I'd thought I wanted, I realized that this wasn't an ending. It was a beginning, and for the first time in months, I felt a glimmer of hope for the future. "No," I said softly, straightening my shoulders. "It's just beginning." The morning sun streamed through the windows as Dennis and I sat in his study, surrounded by stacks of documents and a sense of grim determination. It had been a week since we'd confronted Mark and Patricia, a week of sleepless nights and endless preparation. Today was the day we'd take everything public. "Are you ready for this?" Dennis asked, his voice steady but his eyes betraying a mix of sadness and resolve. I took a deep breath, nodding. "As ready as I'll ever be." What about you? This is your family we're about to expose. Dennis reached across the desk, grasping my hand. You're my family now, Julia. What Mark and Patricia did, they stopped being family the moment they chose greed over love. With trembling fingers, I pressed send on the email that would change everything. In an instant, our carefully compiled evidence was on its way to the board of directors, the company's legal team, and select members of the press. The response was almost immediate. My phone began buzzing incessantly with calls and messages. Dennis's lawyer arrived, looking grim but determined. As the morning wore on, the story broke across local news channels. Breaking news: scandal rocks prominent family business. CEO Dennis Hawthorne alleges attempted murder and fraud by son and wife. I watched the headlines scroll across the screen, feeling a surreal mix of vindication and sorrow. This was it, the moment of truth we'd been working towards. Suddenly, the front door burst open. Mark stormed in, his face contorted with rage. "How could you do this?" he shouted. "You've ruined everything." I stood my ground, facing the man I once thought I loved. "No, Mark. You ruined everything the moment you chose money over your father's life." Patricia appeared behind him, her usual poise shattered. "We can fix this," she pleaded, her eyes wild. "Dennis, darling, surely we can come to some arrangement. Think of the scandal, the family name." "Enough!" Dennis's voice boomed through the room. He stood, walking towards them without assistance. "The family name? The only thing tarnishing our name is your actions. It's over." As if on cue, the sound of police sirens filled the air. Mark's face drained of color. "You called the police? Your own son?" Dennis's expression was a mixture of pain and resolve. "You stopped being my son the moment you conspired against me." "Julia," he turned to me, "would you show the officers in?" I nodded, moving towards the door. As I passed Mark, he grabbed my arm. "Julia, please," he begged. "We can start over. I love you." For a moment, I saw a flicker of the man I'd married. But it was gone in an instant, replaced by the stranger he'd become. "No, Mark," I said softly. "You love what I represented, a way to keep your lifestyle, your inheritance, but you never truly loved me." As the police entered, reading Mark and Patricia their rights, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. The nightmare was finally ending. Hours later, after the dust had settled and the house was quiet once more, Dennis and I sat on the porch, watching the sun set. "What now?" I asked, feeling both exhausted and exhilarated. Dennis smiled, a genuine smile that reached his eyes for the first time in months. "Now, we live. I'm thinking of selling the company, maybe starting a foundation. And you, Julia, you have your whole life ahead of you." I felt tears prick my eyes. I don't even know who I am anymore, outside of all this. Dennis squeezed my hand. "You're the woman who saved my life, who stood up for what's right no matter the cost. That's who you are, Julia, and I couldn't be prouder to call you family." As the last rays of sunlight painted the sky in brilliant hues of orange and pink, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in years I felt truly free to discover who I was, what I wanted, and where I belonged. "You're right," I said, smiling through my tears. "This isn't an ending, it's a new beginning." Dennis raised his glass of iced tea. "To new beginnings and to family, the kind we choose." I clinked my glass against his, feeling a surge of hope for the future. "To family," I echoed. As night fell, I realized that sometimes the greatest acts of love involve letting go. I had let go of a toxic marriage, of false dreams, and of the person I thought I needed to be. In return, I had gained something far more precious: self-respect, true family, and the courage to face whatever came next. The journey had been painful, but as I sat there with Dennis, I knew that every step had been worth it. We had faced our demons, exposed the truth, and come out stronger on the other side. And now, finally, we were free to write our own stories.
My name is Sharon, and by profession, I am an architect. However, on this significant day, I found myself taking on the role of a bride, eagerly making my way down the aisle. I had put my heart and soul into organizing every aspect of our wedding, from the choice of flowers to the playlist that would provide our soundtrack for the evening. I envisioned our special day as if it were lifted from the pages of a romance novel, a testament to the power of love. Standing at the altar was Peter, my soon-to-be husband, who works as an engineer. His approach to life is pragmatic and direct, perfectly balancing my creative instincts. I always felt that we were a great match, enhancing each other's strengths. The excitement of beginning a new chapter with him filled me with joy. However, as our gazes met, I couldn't help but notice a distant, burdened look in his eyes. I attributed it to wedding day jitters. Little did I know I was mistaken. As I walked closer, I overheard Peter's mother, Julie, whispering to someone next to her. Her scrutinizing look made me uneasy, but she managed a strained smile and told me I looked beautiful, though her eyes told a different story. The ceremony moved forward, and when it was time for Peter to speak his vows, there was a heart-stopping pause before he managed to say, "I do." His voice lacked the warmth I had come to associate with his affection for me. During the ring exchange, Julie made it a point to take a photo, loudly stating the importance of capturing the moment. Her words, though seemingly innocent, felt more like a veiled warning than a celebration of our commitment. At the reception, Julie found me mingling with some college friends and commented on my wedding dress with a thinly veiled critique, praising its beauty yet highlighting its non-traditional nature. I responded with a light-hearted remark about celebrating love in our unique way. Before the conversation could go further, Peter stepped in, asking his mother to give us space. For a moment, I thought he was defending our choices, but his comment hinted at resignation rather than support. His words felt out of place on a day that was meant to be filled with nothing but happiness. I scanned the crowd, hoping to lock eyes with someone who might confirm that what I was experiencing was just typical wedding day chaos. Yet deep inside, I knew better. There was a palpable tension, an undeniable sense that something fundamental was amiss, and the red flags were too prominent to overlook any longer. As Peter and I stepped onto the dance floor for our first dance, the distance between us was more than just physical. Our movements were in sync, but emotionally we were worlds apart. The song, intended as a celebration of our union, felt more like a cruel joke. When the music faded, Peter's attempt at reassurance only emphasized the void between us. "So, Mrs. Sharon, ready for forever?" he asked. The irony of his question weighed heavily on me. I wanted to voice my doubts, to question if all our tomorrows would be shadowed by the unease of today. Instead, I masked my concerns with a tentative affirmation, hoping against hope that the gloom would dissipate, and that this rocky beginning was not a foretaste of what was to come. I was unaware that this day would merely serve as the overture to a challenging period that would test not only the resilience of our marriage, but the essence of my identity. As we celebrated our union, the festive toasts felt hollow, overshadowed by a sense of loss. The journey back to my home, a charming 3-bedroom house that stood as a testament to my hard work and independence, marked the beginning of our shared life. This home was meant to be our haven, the foundation for our future together. Yet it soon became the backdrop for a series of confrontations that felt more like an invasion than the start of marital bliss. Julie, living a mere quarter of an hour away, took to visiting uninvited with unsettling frequency. Her criticisms were relentless, targeting everything from my culinary skills to the decor of our home. Her complaints were varied but equally cutting, whether lamenting my tasteless cooking or the choice of bathroom tile color. Peter's attempts to intervene were tepid at best, often seeming more performative than protective. Julie's intrusions became a regular ordeal, each visit an opportunity to assert her dominance through thinly veiled insults and critiques. However, the real turning point came one afternoon when she arrived with suitcases in tow. Her declaration of intent was clear and her sense of entitlement palpable. This was not just another visit, it was an occupation, one that threatened to suffocate the life out of our nascent marriage. "I'm going to be living here now," she announced, breezing past me to place her luggage in my favorite cozy corner by the window. My sanctuary for reading and quiet moments. This spot will be just perfect for me, Julie proclaimed with a finality that made my heart drop. I turned to Peter, my eyes wide with disbelief, silently begging him to intervene to preserve the sanctity of our home. This was a decision we should have made together. Seizing a moment, I called Peter aside, my voice shaking. This is our home. Shouldn't we have talked about this first? His gaze met mine, void of the warmth and love that had once seemed so abundant. Mom's getting older, Sharon. It's not right for her to be alone. She needs to be with family, he explained, stressing the word family in a way that made me feel excluded. So I'm not family. Is that it? The words barely left my lips before the tears began to well up, a mix of hurt and frustration. Peter quickly countered, his patience thinning. You know that's not what I mean, but I owe her this. What about us? What about what we owe to each other? We're supposed to be building our life together, not living with your mom, I argued, but it was as if I was speaking to a wall. My concerns, my feelings seemed inconsequential. And just like that, Julie's move into our home was decided, steamrolling over my wishes. With Julie's arrival, the dynamic of our home shifted drastically. Every corner of the house, once filled with our shared dreams and plans, now felt weighed down by tension and conflict. My once peaceful reading nook was overtaken by her belongings. The kitchen became a stage for her critiques. And Peter, the man I had married, seemed more like an ally to Julie than to me. It dawned on me that I was no longer just fighting to save my marriage or reclaim my space. I was fighting for my very sense of self, my dignity, and my peace. A persistent thought haunted me. How had things come to this point where my desires, my space, and my voice were secondary to Julie's preferences? The transformation was stark. My beloved nook was now a monument to Julie's intrusion. The kitchen was a battleground for her relentless criticism. And my husband had become a stranger, aligning himself with what felt like the opposition. This was only the beginning. Life, already challenging, became an unbearable nightmare as the atmosphere in our home grew increasingly oppressive, symbolizing the shrinking of my own space and voice. To add to the mounting pressure, a discovery brought everything into sharper focus. The unmistakable presence of 2 blue lines on a pregnancy test signaled a new life amidst the turmoil. This revelation intensified the situation, making the already dense atmosphere in the house almost suffocating. As I grappled with the realization that the stakes were now even higher, clutching the pregnancy test, my hands shook with a mixture of anticipation and dread. I had always dreamt that discovering I was pregnant would be one of the happiest moments of my life, a time filled with excitement and celebration. However, standing alone in the bathroom, tears welling up in my eyes as I faced my reflection, I realized this milestone felt more like a heavy burden. When I shared the news with Peter, his reaction was disappointingly tepid. Well, that's something, he muttered, quickly diverting the conversation to a renovation idea his mother had proposed. It became clear that Julie saw my pregnancy not just as news, but as her new project. She took it upon herself to oversee every aspect of it, from what I ate to where I would give birth, all under the guise of being helpful. Julie's interference quickly escalated into a form of control. She scrutinized everything I ate, casting judgmental glances at even the simplest of meals and questioning my weight management, despite my assurances that my diet was doctor-approved. Doctors these days have no clue, she'd scoff dismissively, convinced that her dated wisdom surpassed modern medical advice. As the pregnancy progressed, Julie's demands grew more outrageous. She transformed my home into her domain, expecting me to maintain it to her standards, disregarding the fact that I was pregnant and needed rest. "Sharon, why isn't the living room clean yet?" she would demand from her spot in my once peaceful reading nook, now commandeered as her base for endless phone scrolling and TV watching. My protests of fatigue fell on deaf ears, with Julie insisting that pregnancy was no excuse for laziness. Peter's silence throughout these exchanges only added to the strain. His lack of support became painfully obvious, especially during a dinner that erupted into an argument over baby names. Julie's harsh criticism of my chosen name was the last straw. "Enough, Julie. This is my child, and I will decide how to raise them," I countered, my patience exhausted. Her reaction was one of indignation, as if my asserting some control over my own life was a personal affront. Peter's attempt at peacemaking, siding with his mother and labeling me as emotional, only deepened the chasm between us. I was left feeling more isolated than ever, trapped in a home that had become a battleground where my voice seemed to matter less and less. This wasn't just about choosing a baby name anymore. It was about reclaiming my autonomy, my dignity, and the sense of belonging that had been systematically eroded by Julie's overbearing presence. Gazing into the reflection of my once shiny wedding ring, I hardly recognized the woman looking back at me. A woman who was gradually losing everything she held dear: her sanctuary, her self-respect, and most heartbreakingly, her determination to stand up for herself. It was during one of our tense confrontations that Julie, brimming with a vindictive sense of victory, delivered a blow that would alter everything. She coldly suggested that perhaps I didn't belong in their family. Certainly. Here's the text punctuated and divided into short paragraphs without missing any lines. If I couldn't navigate a simple family disagreement, Peter's response, or lack thereof, was perhaps the most painful part. His silence was louder and more hurtful than any words could ever be, making it painfully clear that my ordeal was not just beginning. It had been my reality for far too long. My days turned into a blur, moving through a house that no longer felt like mine, clinging to the only beacon of hope I had left, the life growing inside me. Yet even this small comfort felt under siege in the toxic environment I found myself in. The breaking point came one frigid evening during yet another excruciating family dinner. Despite my efforts to prepare a flawless meal, Julie's criticisms were relentless, attacking everything from the food seasoning to its preparation. Her words felt like physical blows, each comment a strike against my already wavering confidence. But it was her next jab that cut the deepest, questioning my capability as a mother based on my supposed inadequacy in managing household chores. Peter's agreement with her was the final blow, pushing me over the edge. Fueled by a mix of anger, accumulated resentment, and sheer desperation, I found my voice. "Step it up. I've been carrying our child, taking care of our home, and enduring endless criticism from your mother, and you're telling me to step it up." The shock on their faces said it all, but I was past caring. For too long, I had allowed myself to be diminished and belittled, but in that moment, I reclaimed my voice. "I'm done. I can't do this anymore," I declared, the clarity of my decision piercing through the years of suppression. It was a declaration of my refusal to tolerate any more disrespect or emotional torment. I was ready to fight for myself, for my child, and for a future free from the shadows that had darkened my life. My voice broke as I spoke. I refused to raise my child in a place where their mother is constantly belittled. If this is what being a family means to you, then I want no part in it. With those final words, I left the dinner table behind, their stunned silence echoing in my wake. Grabbing only the essentials, I made my way to the door, my hands trembling as I reached for the knob, eager to escape the suffocating atmosphere. Julie, ever the antagonist, chose that moment for her most cutting remark yet. "And where do you think you're going? This is Peter's house, not yours." I stopped and faced her, my resolve hardening. "Actually, Julie, this house is mine. I bought it. I decide who stays and who goes." Peter's voice broke through, tinged with desperation. "Sharon, please, let's discuss this." But I was beyond negotiation. "There's nothing left to discuss," I replied, my tears a testament to the pain of my decision. Stepping out into the cold night felt like stepping into a new chapter of my life, one filled with uncertainty, but also a sense of liberation. The door closing behind me signified the end of a tumultuous saga, a final farewell to a life I could no longer bear. I walked away, each step a mixture of pain and determination, propelled by the need to reclaim my autonomy. The journey to my parents' home was a blur of cold, fatigue, and heartache. Just a short distance from my haven, a misstep caused me to stumble and fall, the physical pain a mere echo of my inner turmoil. Yet this fall did not deter me, it only strengthened my resolve. Reaching my parents' doorstep, the concern in their eyes mirrored the gravity of my situation. As they ushered me to the hospital, I realized that this moment of vulnerability marked not just an end but a beginning. Lying in the hospital bed with the reality of my circumstances setting in, I understood that returning to my previous life was not an option. This breaking point was a crucial step towards reclaiming the life and dignity that had been eroded away. A painful yet essential transition towards healing and independence. The clarity that comes with such moments is profound, revealing the path forward away from the shadows of the past towards a future of my own making. Caught in a whirlwind of emotions, I stood surrounded by the comforting yet worried presence of my parents. Their concern was palpable, a silent testament to their fears about the true state of my marriage, now unmistakably revealed in its troubled depth. Breaking the heavy silence, my mom voiced her concern, her words heavy with the weight of the unfolding reality. "Sharon, love, what's your plan now?" "Unsure but resolute," I replied. "I'm not sure, Mom, but one thing's clear. I can't return to that life. Not now. Not ever." My declaration, more confident than I anticipated, seemed to echo my newfound determination. My father, who'd been pacing anxiously, paused to reassure me, emphasizing that their support was unwavering regardless of my choice. He reminded me to consider not just my own future, but that of the life growing inside me. His words prompted a silent acknowledgement from me. My mind had been a battlefield of scenarios, each uncertain yet laced with the possibility of a fresh start. The unexpected buzz of my phone broke through my thoughts. A message from Peter, a plea for communication. But to me, his timing was a door long closed. His words unseen were left in the void as I turned off my phone, a symbolic end to our dialogue. My next steps were clear, marked by action rather than words. Reaching out to a family lawyer was my first decisive act towards ending the turmoil of my marriage. Supported by my parents, we navigated the cold legal breakdown of our union, discussing divorce, custody, and financial support. Despite the sterile nature of these discussions, they empowered me, marking the first steps of taking control over my destiny and ensuring the well-being of my unborn child. Within a week, Peter and Julie received the formal notices. Divorce papers for Peter and an eviction notice for Julie from the home that was legally mine. Included were demands for substantial child support and compensation for the emotional turmoil I had endured. Though drastic, these actions were necessary, severing the ties that had long bound me to a life of despair. When I finally re-engaged with my phone, it was flooded with Peter's attempts to reach out. His messages conveyed a mix of regret and a desire for reconciliation. But the scars left by nights of humiliation, years of neglect, and Julie's calculated malice all silently condoned by Peter, were too deep. The brief temptation to hear him out was quickly overshadowed by the memory of the pain endured. This moment wasn't just about ending a chapter. It was about reclaiming my story, one where the shadows of the past no longer dictated the brightness of my future. The love I once felt for him had been completely overshadowed by the sorrow of our failed marriage. I took decisive steps to move on, deleting messages, removing his contact information, and blocking him across all social media. To me, Peter had become just a part of my history, a distressing chapter I was more than ready to conclude. Despite knowing the road ahead would be fraught with its own obstacles, divorce is complicated, even more so with a child on the way. I was finally navigating my own life's direction, stepping out from the shadow that had enveloped me towards a future filled with hope. The day of the court proceedings, the room was filled with that distinct sterile chill characteristic of spaces where fates are decided. My lawyer sat beside me, her posture exuding assurance, while my parents offered silent, steady support from behind. Across the aisle, Peter appeared lost, the reality of the situation dawning on him, while Julie's expression was one of shock and defiance. As the session began, the judge walked in, prompting everyone to rise. The process that followed was a flurry of legal jargon, with accusations and evidence laid bare. It was as if Julie and Peter were seeing their actions for the first time, not just through the legal lens, but mine as well. When it came to Julie's turn to speak, her usual confidence was absent. She attempted to justify her actions as concern for her son's welfare, but her explanation fell flat, especially under the judge's skeptical gaze. Judge Nina R. Morrison's verdict was clear and firm. I was granted a full divorce and sole custody of our unborn child. Peter was ordered to provide child support, and Julie, faced with a hefty fine for her emotional abuse and harassment, was visibly shaken. As the judge's gavel fell, a sense of liberation washed over me. Though it was not without a tinge of sadness, my marriage had concluded, not with dramatic confrontations, but through the quiet shuffling of papers and the firm voice of justice. This chapter of my life was closed, paving the way for a new beginning, free from the chains of the past. Gaining my freedom came at a price I'd never envisioned on the day I pledged my vows. As we exited the courtroom, Peter approached with a bewildered look, expressing his sorrow and disbelief at how our lives had unraveled. Looking into his eyes, I no longer saw my future, but rather a profound emptiness where love once resided. I never imagined this would be our end, Peter, but apologies can't undo what's been done. I told him decisively, turning away to leave the past behind. Julie sought my gaze, possibly hoping for a sign of forgiveness or recognition, but I couldn't afford her that closure. She had taken too much from me, and I refused to let her see how deeply she had affected my light. Stepping outside, the world seemed to embrace me anew, with the sun shining brighter and colors more vivid. It felt like I was viewing life with a fresh perspective, one not dimmed by the shadows of turmoil. My mother's embrace and words of pride brought tears to my eyes. "You're truly free now, Sharon," she said, her emotion evident. "I couldn't have faced this without you and Dad," I responded, feeling an immense gratitude for their unwavering support. That evening, in the solitude of my home, now solely mine, I felt a deep tranquility. Alone yet far from lonely, for the first time in a long stretch, I was free to live by my own standards. The path ahead as a single mother seemed daunting, yet as I felt my unborn child's subtle movements, confidence washed over me. We would manage, I was sure of it. The ordeal I had endured led me to this moment of self-discovery. While it left scars, they marked a tale of resilience, not defeat. Facing the future, I was not just compelled by circumstance, but driven by choice. This distinction filled me with a profound sense of empowerment, ready for what lay ahead, not out of necessity, but from a place of deliberate decision. I knew this was the start of a meaningful new chapter. Your father is no longer with us, you know. This house belongs to me, his wife. So you better leave soon, my stepmother said in a tone like she was scolding a small child. The funeral for my father had just ended, my heart as dark and heavy as an overcast sky was disturbed, and in my anger I retorted, yours. This is my childhood home. You're the one who should leave. After all your affairs with younger men, betraying my father over and over, you have no right to call yourself his wife. As I glared at her, she placed her hands on her hips and snorted dismissively. Well, that's too bad. Unfortunately for you, I'm inheriting this house and the $1 million estate. I am kind enough to share a little, though. How about $50? With that, my stepmother laughed loudly, and I couldn't help but laugh along. This seemed to annoy her, who furrowed her brow and visibly became upset. What's so funny? No, it's just you really know nothing, do you? Your head is a bit too much in the clouds, isn't it? I then presented a document to her, who was turning red with anger. Can you read this? At that moment, my stepmother's face turned pale. No, it can't be. It's a lie, right? My name is Kelly. I am a 29-year-old homemaker, also working part-time. My father was a lawyer, fairly well known among his peers. He started his own law firm and worked tirelessly with a few colleagues. My mother passed away when I was young, and I barely remember her. My father was always busy with work, so I was raised mostly by my grandmother. However, I never felt dissatisfied with this life. Even without my parents, my grandmother was always kind. And I was fortunate in my other relationships as well, supported by many. I grew up smoothly and graduated from high school without trouble. But as I began to enjoy my university life, a shadow fell over my seemingly perfect existence. A new mother appeared in our family, which had always been just my father and me. This lady will be your mother from today. Try to get along. The woman suddenly introduced to me was clad in designer brands from head to toe. Nice to meet you, Kelly. You can call me Mom, and we can go shopping together. While she seemed like a bright and beautiful person, someone I might have gotten along with as a neighbor, living with her as a mother was a different story. In conclusion, our personalities did not mesh well. I'm more of an indoor person, preferring to relax at home with a coffee on days off. On the other hand, my stepmother couldn't sit still, always going out shopping or to drinking parties. I didn't exactly dislike her, but we tended to avoid each other. But that wasn't the real problem. What came later was much more significant. After graduating from university, I was hired as an office worker at a general company. My workplace was about a 20-minute train ride from home, so I planned to commute from my parents' house for the time being. My relationship with my stepmother continued as usual, without any attacks or harassment, so I decided not to move out immediately. Anyway, about 6 months after joining the company, I attended a social gathering organized by my colleagues. I'm not good with alcohol, so I wasn't enthusiastic. But I couldn't miss the drinking party as almost all my coworkers were going. On the way home from the party, walking with a few people who were heading in the same direction through a bustling street crowd, I spotted a familiar figure from behind. It was my stepmother. While thinking that this was where she was hanging out, I inadvertently looked next to her and noticed an unfamiliar young man walking alongside her. If they were merely walking next to each other, I could have believed they were just friends despite the age difference. However, shockingly, she had her arm entwined with the young man's arm. The unmistakably intimate atmosphere made me involuntarily catch my breath. A colleague walking next to me asked, "What's wrong?" All I could do was laugh it off, unable to tell a colleague who I had only known for a few months that my stepmother might be cheating with a young man. So I made up an excuse about having somewhere to be and sent my colleagues home first, deciding to follow my stepmother. Fortunately, it was easy to follow them in the bustling crowd of the lively downtown area. My stepmother and the young man occasionally leaned in close to talk to each other, looking every bit like a cozy couple. After about 3 minutes of walking, my stepmother and the young man looked around cautiously before entering a building. It turned out to be a lodging facility. The shock was so great that I felt nauseous, but quickly left the area. I had sensed that my stepmother was a flashy, sociable type, but I never imagined she would cheat. This was a betrayal against my father and against me as well. Angered by her immoral behavior, I decided to confront her the next day when she returned home in the morning. As if nothing had happened, she said sarcastically, slightly drunk from a night of drinking, "I saw you were arm in arm with a young man entering a short-stay hotel." Try making an excuse for that, caught off guard by my directness. My stepmother froze with her mouth open, but quickly managed a smile. Are you sure that was really me? You didn't see me from the front, right? Maybe it was someone who looks like me." She was implicitly challenging me to produce proof. That put me in a difficult position because I didn't have any evidence, even though I saw it with my own eyes. She could easily dodge the issue like this. "You're too naive, Kelly dear. Maybe it's because you're from a good family. You want to drive me out of the house, but that's too bad. Come back when you can prove it." With that, she lifted her chin triumphantly and looked down at me. Frustrated, I decided to prove her infidelity. I spent all the money I could on a private investigator who, after a week, confirmed my suspicions. Astonishingly, it turned out that she was cheating with 3 different men at the same time, all of them young. Now, armed with this information, I went to my father. He had always been busy since my childhood. "Dad, it's about Mom," I said. My father glanced at me briefly before returning his gaze to the documents in front of him. "I'm busy now. Talk later. And it's Mom, not the woman. I don't care about that she's cheating." I was cut off as my father's smartphone rang. He answered it without excusing himself. It was always like this, neglected by a father too busy with his work. It might sound immature for someone over 20, but it wasn't fair. What was I getting so heated about? What was I even expecting? It all seemed so foolish. Disillusioned, I decided to move out on my own, distancing myself physically from my father and stepmother. Living on my own for the first time was chaotic and challenging, but life was more comfortable without my indifferent father and my reckless stepmother. Years later, I started dating a senior colleague at work, and we eventually got married. After discussing it, we decided not to have a wedding ceremony. If I had a wedding ceremony, I would have to face my father and stepmother. I just couldn't accept that. Instead, I wore a wedding dress and sent only my father a photo of it. After that, the life of just my husband and me began. We were happiest planning our future life together, like building a house once we saved a bit more money or thinking about having children soon. In the years since I started living alone, I rarely heard from my father, so it was a shock when his name appeared on my smartphone screen that day. "Hello, what do you want now?" The voice that came through the phone was of a man I didn't recognize. He introduced himself as one of my father's colleagues and said that my father had suddenly collapsed at work and was taken to the hospital. I was on a break at work, so I explained the situation to my boss and immediately took a taxi to the hospital where my father was taken. When I arrived at the hospital, there was a man in a suit standing at the entrance. It seemed he had come to meet me. He led me to a hospital room where my father lay in bed, looking pale, with various tubes connected to him and not moving at all. "Dad," I involuntarily sat down beside the bed, and my father's colleague offered me a chair and said, "We can't reach his wife." It seemed he had tried to contact my stepmother at the same time as me but couldn't get through, no matter how many times he called. Such bad timing in an emergency. My father's colleague said he would try to contact her again, but I couldn't trouble him further. Reluctantly, I decided to call my stepmother from my smartphone. I tried calling, but she didn't answer. 10 minutes later, I called again with the same result. About 30 minutes later, my stepmother finally called back. "What do you want? It's troublesome to receive so many calls." "I have my own things to deal with," she grumbled. I finally got through. "Actually, Dad has collapsed and is now at the hospital. It's the big hospital in front of the station. When can you come?" As I relayed this with restrained irritation, my stepmother groaned. Then, in an unnaturally cheerful voice, she said, "Well, I can't make it. I'm really busy. So I'll leave everything about him to you, Kelly. Call me if something happens. Bye-bye." Before I could reply, my stepmother had already hung up unilaterally. I tried to call back immediately, but couldn't get through. She might have turned off her phone. I had thought that even a woman who cheated would come to the hospital if her husband collapsed, but I was too optimistic. "Leave everything to you," as she said. My stepmother did not come to visit, let alone care for him during that time. I took care of hospital admissions, daily care, and paperwork using up my paid leave. Although my father and I had been estranged for years, I was still worried about him in this situation. I did everything I could, hoping he would wake up soon. As I visited the hospital daily, but that wish was not fulfilled. Eventually, my father never woke up and passed away. Then things were so hectic, I barely remember them, and I had no time to mourn. I had to contact lawyers and acquaintances from the law firm my father had started, arrange for the funeral, and there was a lot to do. The people from my father's office helped with contacting relevant parties, which was a relief. But my stepmother did nothing as she had said, and only showed up on the day of the funeral. There, in front of everyone, she cried at my father's coffin. She hadn't helped when my father or I was in trouble, but she acted like a tragic heroine when others were watching. Watching how far would she go in mocking people. At that moment, I found myself moving. I forcefully grabbed my stepmother's arm and took her outside the venue. "Enough, you are so insincere. Never show your face to me again." I said this in anger. My stepmother immediately stopped crying. "Huh, what?" Acting all high and mighty, huh? "Fine, I'll leave for today. Just wait and see who will have the last laugh later." With those ominous words, she left with loud footsteps. 2 weeks later, after the funeral, and once everything settled down, I visited my childhood home for the first time in years. I was there to start organizing my father's belongings in earnest. While I had previously moved documents related to his work to his law firm, personal items like his clothes and books had remained untouched. I didn't think my stepmother would bother to sort through them, so it was up to me. About an hour into sorting and cleaning, my stepmother, who seemed to have been out, came home. She burst into the living room with vigor. "Oh my, Kelly, what are you doing here? This house is mine now. You shouldn't just come in uninvited." She said this in a tone one might use to scold a small child. I countered while I continued to organize my father's effects. "Yours? This is my childhood home. The one intruding is you." At that, my stepmother placed her hands on her hips and puffed out her chest dramatically. "This house and $1 million inheritance are mine to inherit, but because I'm generous, I might share a little with you. How about, say, $50? I couldn't help but laugh at her high-pitched laughter. This seemed to annoy her, and she frowned deeply, her face clearly showing displeasure. "What's so funny? What are you even talking about? You have no right to the inheritance." As I said this, my stepmother froze as if time had stopped. And when she finally understood, her face turned red with anger. "I am his wife. It's only natural that I inherit the house and the money," she insisted. "Yes, his common-law wife, right? Common-law spouses aren't legal heirs. Didn't you know that?" I widened my eyes in feigned surprise. "You probably avoided submitting a marriage certificate to have an easy out when your affairs were discovered. But it backfired, didn't it? You're always sloppy when it matters most." "Sorry, but you can't kick me out. It's you who should be leaving." "Oh, and if you need money, shall I give you some?" "How about, let's see, $50? I said this as if releasing years of pent-up frustration. My stepmother's face turned even redder, probably from embarrassment. But a common-law wife can inherit if there's a will, right? And what about being the beneficiary of a life insurance policy?" My stepmother was desperately trying to find a way to get her hands on the inheritance, but it was futile. "I am the beneficiary of the life insurance, and there was no will. He passed away suddenly, and I think survivor's pension might be difficult too. You would need to prove your status as a common-law wife, but with evidence of your affairs, it's probably not going to be recognized." Though I wasn't very familiar with the details of survivor pensions, it seemed effective in intimidating my stepmother as her hopes were dashed one by one. Her face grew more stern, and I delivered the final blow. "You're a complete stranger here. Pack your things and leave, or I'll call the police," I stated firmly. My stepmother bit her lower lip in frustration, hurriedly packed her clothes into a suitcase, and stormed out of the house. Rumors of what happened to her reached me later. Having relied on my father's income, she hadn't worked for years. Therefore, she couldn't find a full-time job now and was living a day-to-day life doing odd jobs. However, her selfish nature didn't change, and she soon tried to approach old acquaintances for support. But none of them were willing to take her in. Who was lacking money and no longer possessing the beauty of her youth? Then my stepmother took an outrageous step. She appeared before my husband claiming, "I am more beautiful and appealing as a woman than Kelly." It seemed she wanted to orchestrate a scenario where I would witness this and think it was an affair. But naturally, my husband refused her advances. Frustrated at not getting money, my stepmother tried to wreck my family, which only made her seem pitiful. Later, I swiftly called the police, and my stepmother received a stern warning. Hopefully, she learned her lesson from this incident. Incidentally, when I was sorting through my father's belongings, I found something curious. It was his diary. Though it might be wrong to read someone's diary, even if they have passed away, I was too curious about his thoughts and read a little. The entries were full of words of concern for my health and future prospects. Is Kelly eating properly? Is she not suffering too much at her job? Were some of the lines written. It appeared that my father had worked so hard because he wanted to ensure I wouldn't struggle financially in the future. Tucked in the diary was a photo. It showed my young father, my biological mother, and me, all smiling. I was in my mother's arms, and my father was hugging her shoulder. Seeing that photo, I finally felt it. I was loved by my parents. There was another photo in the diary, a recent one of my father and my stepmother. While I didn't understand why my father maintained a common-law relationship with my stepmother, it seemed he cared about her in his way. Unfortunately, that feeling was not reciprocated by her. I resolved to become someone who could not only receive love, but also understand it. Then, to my joy, I found out I was pregnant. We recently visited the hospital, and it seems the baby is developing well. Looking ahead to when our child grows up, my husband and I decided to live in the house my father left us. Our current rented apartment doesn't have enough space for a child's room. We've decided to spend money for our child's sake. Everything is for the sake of our forthcoming child. Just as my parents loved me, I will love this child. I made that promise to myself. Hello, my name is Hannah, a 36-year-old high school teacher who recently discovered that she might inherit over $4 million. Her family is already making big plans. Her husband, Walter, an office worker 3 years her senior, joyfully declared he had quit his job to start a business with the anticipated funds. At the same time, Hannah's mother-in-law is dreamily overseeing the construction of a duplex where they could all live together, featuring her ideal kitchen. Caught in the whirlwind of their plans, Hannah tries to intervene. "Wait, I haven't received any inheritance yet. Why are you quitting jobs and building homes?" But the enthusiasm is hard to curb. Her father-in-law even suggests a celebratory trip to Florida. In the chaos, despite the confusion and her rising anger, Hannah feels powerless. The thought of her family spending her potential inheritance freely troubles her deeply. This all started a few months back. Hannah's life had been a balance of teaching and raising her daughter, Samantha, who was born shortly after she married Walter. Today she is visiting her hospitalized mother with Samantha. "Oh, Grandma, it's been a while," Samantha exclaims, greeting her grandmother who caresses her hair with a frail hand. A mysterious middle-aged man in glasses leaves the room as Hannah enters. Her mother, with eyes sparkling a soft blue, assures Hannah that all is well. Hannah reminisces about her upbringing with her immigrant parents who had moved from overseas to run a business. Raised with love and financial stability, she credits her success and values to her parents who instilled in her the importance of education and hard work from a young age. A few years after my father's passing, my mother's health declined, and she was admitted to the hospital. With her health in focus, she handed over the family business to a relative, choosing to spend her days in quiet recovery. "I'm fine, Mom. Do you need anything?" I asked during one of our visits. Her reply warmed my heart. "Just having you and Samantha come to see me is more than enough." Samantha, my 9-year-old daughter, chatted eagerly with her about school and the latest book she'd read. Watching her, I felt a surge of pride. Though I may be biased, Samantha is a bright and honest child who's navigating her formative years beautifully. When we returned home, Walter greeted us with curiosity. "How's my mother-in-law doing?" After updating him, he shared tidbits from a seminar he attended, focusing on starting a side business. Walter's been keen on increasing our income, perhaps driven by a dissatisfaction with his current job, which isn't top tier but stable enough. Combined with my teaching salary, sometimes his eagerness for more financial gain. A trait he might have inherited from his parents feels overwhelming. His parents have always had a knack for penny pinching, often awkwardly asking for money during visits, which has strained our relationship. They rarely spoil Samantha, not even with Christmas gifts. But fortunately, they live far enough away that our interactions are minimal. Despite these frictions, our home life is steady. Walter is adept with household chores, and I cherish my days with him, Samantha, and the peaceful life we've built. But then a sudden call from the hospital turned everything upside down. My mother's condition had drastically worsened, thrusting our family into a rush to be by her side. My mother's breaths were shallow, her voice barely above a whisper as she spoke her last words to me. "Hannah, I always wanted you to be happy. Cherish Samantha more than anything. I love you." Those words, filled with love and care, were the last I heard from her. My mother had dedicated her life to raising me alongside my father and had a special bond with my daughter Samantha. At her funeral, her expression was serene, and all I could do was weep alongside Samantha, who was equally devastated. Sometime after her passing, a mysterious envelope arrived at our house, bearing the seal of a law firm. Puzzled, I opened it to find a document inside. It stated that I was the sole beneficiary of my mother's will, a topic we had never discussed. With the document in hand, I decided to visit the law firm on my own. "Hello, I'm the attorney Roy," said the man who greeted me, a middle-aged gentleman with glasses I recognized from the hospital. "Heidel, you were in my mother's hospital room," I said, remembering his face. "Yes, we met there," he replied. "From that time, I was entrusted by your mother." His kind voice nearly brought me to tears again. Then he revealed something astonishing. "Your mother left you an inheritance of $6 million. When your father passed, you waived your right to the inheritance, so your mother could receive it all after taxes. This is the amount you inherit," he said. I was stunned. My parents had been wealthy, but I had never imagined the magnitude of their fortune. After marrying, I never asked them for money and avoided discussing inheritances, considering it bad luck. But here I was, feeling overwhelmed by this final gesture of love from my mother. "Your mother cared about you deeply," Roy continued, his tone reassuring. "She instructed me to assist you if necessary. Please feel free to discuss anything with me." Grateful, I thanked him multiple times and left the office feeling a mix of sorrow and gratitude. As time passed, the weight of this inheritance and my mother's enduring love stayed with me. Around the time of her 50-day memorial service, Hannah found herself increasingly troubled by her family's focus on the inheritance. Her husband, Walter, aware of her family's wealth from the days when her father ran his successful business, began to frequently inquire about the inheritance. Each time he brought it up, Hannah, still deep in mourning, asked him to drop the subject. He would comply, only to later revisit the topic, unable to hide his curiosity about the financial details. The situation worsened during the memorial service itself. Her father-in-law, perhaps trying to appear helpful, awkwardly broached the topic. "Hannah, if you're worried about managing the inheritance, we're here to help. We've dealt with family inheritance issues before. It can get tricky," he offered. His words, meant to reassure, felt hollow to Hannah, given his and her mother-in-law's usual disinterest in offering genuine help. 4 months after her mother's passing, Walter's patience seemed to wane. He confronted Hannah again, this time more directly. "Have you received your mother's inheritance yet?" Feeling a rush of discomfort, Hannah chose to mislead him. "The procedures are complicated, so not yet," she said. In truth, she had already secured the inheritance safely in a deposit box on the advice of Roy, the attorney, but felt it prudent to keep this information private. Walter seemed unusually cheerful as he retreated to the bedroom, leaving Hannah with a sense of foreboding. The next day, as she and her daughter Samantha were cleaning up after dinner, the doorbell rang. Samantha rushed to answer it, and when Hannah looked from the kitchen, she saw her in-laws standing at the door with Walter, who had just returned from work. Surprised and a bit apprehensive, Hannah wondered what brought them there. Unexpectedly, the atmosphere at home became tense when Samantha, sensing the growing unease, anxiously glanced at everyone before retreating to her room. At Hannah's urging, she asked, "What's happening here?" hoping to keep the situation calm. "We have something to celebrate today," exclaimed her father-in-law, clearly in high spirits as he pulled a beer from the fridge. Her mother-in-law, carrying the same buoyant mood, chimed in with a dreamy tone. "You've inherited over $4 million, right? We've already started on a duplex for us all to live together." It even has the modern kitchen of my dreams." Hannah, stunned, could barely process their words. "What are you talking about? I told you I haven't received any inheritance yet." Walter, her husband, with a look of satisfaction, revealed his plans. "I quit my job and decided to start a business using that inheritance," he said, assuming the money was already theirs to use. Hannah felt the room spin as her family's assumptions piled up. "You've quit your job, and you're building a house. We haven't received any inheritance yet. Why are you acting like it's a done deal?" ignoring her protest. Walter and her mother-in-law only grew more enthusiastic discussing plans for a trip to Florida before the duplex was completed. Then Walter, with a dismissive laugh, accused Hannah of being stingy. "We've checked into it. You can't refuse an inheritance if you don't claim it within 4 months. So whether you processed it or not, the inheritance is yours." His logic was flawed, but he continued, fueled by misplaced certainty. "Considering the scale of my father's company, it has to be more than $4 million. We'll live comfortably. Be sure to have the money ready for the duplex in my startup capital." Hannah's head spun as she faced the misguided enthusiasm and pressure from her husband and in-laws. Feeling trapped in a whirlwind of misunderstanding and expectation, Hannah was at her wit's end, overwhelmed by the audacity of her husband and in-laws who eagerly plotted to use the inheritance from her mother for their lavish desires. Though anger boiled within her, she couldn't bring herself to erupt, not with Samantha possibly overhearing from the next room. Needing to escape, she muttered, "I'm going outside for a bit." But her words were lost in their enthusiastic chatter about spending the inheritance. She left the house, wallowing in the cool embrace of the night, forgotten. Into the cool embrace of the night, she found solace at a hilltop park, a place steeped in memories of time spent with her mother. There, amidst the solitude, she allowed herself to cry, stifling her sobs. The injustice of the situation gnawed at her, her family's exploitation of her emotions, and their disregard for her feelings. Yet the thought of divorce tangled in her mind. How could she append Samantha's life? Her mother's parting words, "Take care of Samantha above all else," echoed in her heart, renewing her tears. A gentle voice unexpectedly addressed her. Startled, she looked up to find a stranger offering a sympathetic ear. Their conversation over the next few moments provided a sliver of comfort. 5 days later, Hannah summoned her resolve, along with her husband and in-laws, to a private room in a local restaurant. "So you finally came back home. Did you withdraw the money?" they asked, almost immediately ignoring the palpable tension. Walter added, "You shouldn't leave home without telling your husband." Ignoring their probing, Hannah reached into her bag and placed a document on the table. It was a completed divorce notice. "Walter, I want a divorce," she declared firmly. The room went silent for a moment before her husband stammered, "What are you saying?" Panic flashed across his face, and the in-laws exchanged bewildered glances. "I can't do this anymore," Hannah continued, her voice steady despite the turmoil inside. Walter's face flushed with anger as he retorted, "You're leaving us after getting the inheritance. You've changed because of the money, you miser." Hannah snapped back, her patience finally breaking. "Ever since I received my mother's estate, you've been out of control, quitting your job, deciding we'd live with your parents, planning to build a duplex with our savings, all without even asking me. I've had enough." The confrontation marked a turning point as Hannah stood firm against the greed and manipulation that had come to define her relationship with Walter and his parents. As they discussed a potential trip to Florida, the confrontation escalated. Who is the one who changed when the money came in? "I can't possibly stay with such people," Hannah stated firmly, her resolve unwavering. "Wait, you can't just divorce me like that," Walter protested, desperation creeping into his voice. His parents chimed in. That's right. Our savings after marriage are shared property. Half of the inheritance belongs to Walter no matter what. That's correct. If it comes to that, we will take $4 million with us, they declared, their faces twisted with greed as they moved closer to Hannah. Just as she was about to retort, the door to the private room slid open. Dad, Grandpa, and Grandma should know better. The inheritance Mom received doesn't become shared property, right, Mr. Roy? Samantha's voice cut through the tension as she entered the room, followed by Attorney Roy. And who are you? Walter demanded, his tone mixed with confusion and irritation. I am Attorney Roy. Hannah's mother entrusted me with this matter, and I've been advising Hannah. Roy explained as he and Samantha entered the room. The room fell silent for a moment as Walter looked visibly flustered. That's all well and good, but wait. Walter stammered, trying to regain his composure. The inheritance doesn't become shared property. That's correct, Roy confirmed. Inherited property from a deceased parent does not become shared property, nor is it subject to division in a divorce. You've got to be kidding me. Is this a mistake? Walter blurted out, his voice tinged with disbelief. Amidst the flustered responses from Walter and his parents, Hannah was taken aback by their blatant assumption that her inheritance was up for grabs. In that case, it's even more reason not to divorce. I'll cling to you no matter what, Walter exclaimed, his eyes bloodshot with desperation. Stop it already, Samantha interjected firmly, her calm yet stern voice silencing the room. Since Mom suggested divorce, has Dad ever thought about Mom once? Grandpa and Grandma only ever talk about money. They never once mention me. I can't consider such people as family. Hannah looked at her daughter, her heart swelling with pride, yet aching from the bitter truths being unveiled. The room echoed with Samantha's words, underscoring the deep rift that had formed, driven by greed and misunderstanding. On the day, I found myself overwhelmed by grief and frustration over my inheritance. It was Samantha who stood by my side. She came running after me, her words fueling my resolve. Dad, Grandpa, and Grandma are out of line trying to take Grandma's legacy for themselves. Mom, I'm on your side. Let's fight this together. Heartened by her support, I contacted Roy, the attorney, to set up this crucial meeting. In the meeting, my husband and his parents tried to sway Samantha. Samantha, it's not like that. Dad wants you to be happy. Walter pleaded. His parents added, you'd be happier living with us, wouldn't you? A child shouldn't interfere. Samantha, visibly frustrated by their words, stood her ground. I'm going with Mom. I can't bear to be with you anymore, she declared, turning away to avoid their pleading looks. Firmly, I supported her decision. We've made up our minds. Samantha and I will be leaving. Walter, now angry, retaliated. Hey, I've never cheated, and you can't just force a divorce. I'll hire a lawyer. We'll get that money one way or another. It was then that Roy spoke up, his voice calm yet assertive. The issue here is not just about the money. There are serious reasons to consider not continuing this marriage, Walter. You quit your job and used household savings without permission. You decided we all should live together, and now Samantha says she can't bear it. These are all significant points we can argue. Roy continued, moreover, your daughter recorded everything you and your parents said about trying to claim Hannah's inheritance. That recording can also serve as evidence. Upon hearing this, Walter slumped defeated, while my in-laws turned pale, realizing the gravity of the situation. The meeting, though tense, had crystallized our path forward, underpinned by the unwavering support between Samantha and me, and the competent guidance of Roy. A year after that tumultuous meeting in the restaurant, thanks to diligent legal efforts, my divorce from Walter was finalized. Samantha and I moved into the house where my mother had lived, hoping for a fresh start. However, our peace was occasionally disturbed by letters from Walter proclaiming his love and asking us to come back. More unsettling was seeing him loiter near Samantha's school, prompting us to seek legal help again. This time, we obtained a restraining order to ensure our safety. Life quieted down after that. Rumor had it that Walter and his parents did go through with building a duplex, but life was not kind to them. My retired in-laws had to return to work in a factory, and Walter struggled to find employment, eventually settling for manual labor. From what I heard from neighbors, the duplex was a constant battleground of arguments, earning them an unfavorable reputation in the neighborhood. Meanwhile, Samantha and I enjoyed our peaceful existence, supporting each other through everything. One day, Samantha expressed a desire to study abroad in the country where her grandmother had grown up. Seeing this as an opportunity to cut ties completely with my past life and start anew, we decided to move overseas. We used a portion of my mother's inheritance for this new beginning, a decision I knew my mother would have supported. Now Samantha thrives in her new school environment, and I have resumed my teaching career abroad. Every day feels like a step forward in our journey towards lasting peace. We hope to continue living these serene days, far removed from the chaos of the past.